Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Danola Stanley, and I'm here with Dr. Shireen Samuel Condogle to talk about childhood obesity. But before we start, Doctor, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me to discuss such an important topic. I am a pediatrician. I have been practicing in the local area, Laurel, Silver Spring, since 2009 after graduating from residency. I am full-time for a few years and then went to practice in urgent care for a while and had a few more kids. So I went back to private practice, and that is where I am right now in Laurel.
Thank you, Dr. Samuel, for being here with us today. Can you shed some light on what childhood obesity is? What are some risk factors?
So childhood obesity is considered to be a growing problem in our communities, here and even across the world, mainly in our country. There are many factors that can encourage these rates to keep going up. And recently, in recent years, the risk factors have been the balance that we see between consuming certain calories with our food and our drinks versus burning these calories. So our children specifically, in my expertise, we've seen that the increase that we've had with less active kids, mainly after the pandemic, increase of cell phone use, more video games, more activities that include being at home and being on the couch or the bed, that has increased our obesity rates, mainly from not burning enough of the calories that we're actually consuming. So that is the biggest factor with obesity for adults and children. What we take in, we have to utilize. Food is our fuel. And if you don't really use our food in the calorie that we consume as our fuel to work and burn those calories, we will store it. And storing it can occur, and it occurs on a daily basis. So over time, we see that obesity becomes an issue. So 2018, the obesity rate in this country was 18%. And from the pandemic, which is only a few years after that, it has gone up to 22%. So we are dealing with a large problem right now, and it is our job to sort of figure out ways that we can be practical about it, be honest about it, and be aggressive about it.
So how can families and communities address these challenges?
So mainly it's a topic that we tend to want your pediatrician to be part of that conversation. Being honest, being aware of what is happening around, especially in our communities, the types of activities that we get our kids involved in, the types of foods that we introduce in our home on a regular basis. These are things we have to be aware of as parents specifically. Make sure that we do not have foods that are going to give empty but very high calorie intake. Include activities in their kids' lives that are highly based on burning and keeping those calories at a minimum. Those are some things that we can definitely do and incorporate in our regular lives.
As a pediatrician, are there any long-term complications due to childhood obesity?
So the long-term complications is really what is the main concern with pediatric medicine. Childhood obesity is the precursor for many long-term issues. Just named to go down the body and the list of it, we see, of course, the more common ones is cholesterol, high cholesterol, hypertension, diabetes. We are seeing more kids with high cholesterol before the age of 12. We are seeing more kids with hypertension before the age of 12 to 15. We're seeing pre-diabetes and even active type 2 diabetes in our adolescent kids. So those are some of the physical factors that we check and screen for on a regular basis, starting at the age of 10 and above. The other implications of obesity can be more mental and physical. So it does have more asthma issues, respiratory issues for children who are overweight. It also causes what we actually have seen more of recently since the pandemic is depression, anxiety. A lot of those factors are included into our risk factors when we are assessing a patient to see what the best plan of treatment is for their obesity.
So is it crucial for us to address it early on?
It is absolutely an important challenge that we have. There are many studies, and we as pediatricians are trained to know that before the age of 12, and that's our magic number that we try to remember, we try to get the children to be at a normal body weight for their age and their height. This causes almost a 70% less risk factor for them to become obese adults. So if we can get them to think about healthy eating, exercising, and having an active lifestyle that becomes part of their ritual, part of their routine before the age of 12, their likelihood of having more risk factors as an obese adult is much, much less. So long-term implications of how we practice our food intake and our exercise activities in general can further go into the adulthood as far as figuring out how those lifestyles can continue past childhood into adulthood.
Do you have any practical tips for parents or caregivers to promote healthy eating habits and an active lifestyle for children in today's digital age?
Yes, this is one of our main goals when we meet with our patients. In our office in particular, and in most offices across the country, we would like to meet the child who might be struggling with weight concerns or pre-diabetes, cholesterol issues, hypertension. We meet with them about every 3 months. This gives them a sense of accountability, of making sure that this is at a forefront. They're going to see me in 3 months, so let's see what changes have been made. Most of the time, we see children every year. And in a year, a lot of things can happen and a lot of things can change. But seeing them every 12 or 16 weeks even helps us to get on top of their changes and being at the mindset of it. So some practical tips that we usually recommend, and it's very easy to adhere to, is out of 5 to 6 days out of the week, we encourage our patients to try their best to be careful about the food choices they make. So I always tell my kids at the office, Monday through Friday, I want you to be really careful about what kind of calories you're consuming. If it's juice, if it's extra snacks after school, high-calorie foods like cookies and chips, try to just cut those out during the week while you're in school. On the weekend, there's get-togethers, there's potlucks, there's parties. There, it's okay to consume some, indulgence that you may think about doing. And so restricting them during the week and then letting them have a few days where they can eat things actually causes them to be more mindful of what they're putting. And that is the majority of their calories is during the week. Another thing is just to try your best to add a fruit or a vegetable to each meal. Sometimes that is cumbersome, but it's very important. It's important for kids to see a fruit or vegetable in their diet with each meal. So this becomes a habit that they see. Some parents say, oh, they don't like it, they don't like to eat this. And then years go by, and then they all of a sudden as adults will see broccoli or a salad or a piece of fruit on their plate, and they haven't seen it in years, and it's not part of their diet. So it's always good to keep introducing it, even if they don't want to eat all of it. Trying it, having it on their plate, it being present is a very important factor in how they view their diet. The other thing is water. Our kids just don't drink water. So making sure that they have a water bottle around them most of the time. Water actually creates a sense where you feel hungry or you feel tired, and it fills you up to a point where you don't want to go and rush out to snack. You don't overeat when you have adequate water. So that's very important to teach our kids. So the fitness part of it is, doing things that are 20 minutes. I always tell my patients, start with 20 minutes, maybe 3 times a day. Just try to get active. Try to make it a point to say, I'm just going to take out this small time frame in my day on a Monday or a Tuesday, Monday or a Wednesday and a Friday, just to get active. This could be done a lot of times in your living room, in the bedroom of the child. YouTube has a ton of kids' activities that are 20 minutes long, 30 minutes long, that an instructor will sit there and talk with them and coach them in doing things without any equipment, without anything, but it increases your heart rate, it gets you to burn some calories, and it gets you in the mindset that you are exercising. And the last thing is just to get consistent, very consistent. Consistency is key. Your child is not going to be able to drop weight for months, but when they're consistently doing things to be careful with their diet. They're consistently cutting out certain high-calorie foods. They're consistently drinking their water. They're consistently taking 20 minutes 3 or 4 times a week to exercise. All of that pays off little by little, and the weight will stay off. And also just get a buddy, a person that will work out with you, the person that will motivate you. So having them find a friend, a cousin, a neighbor, someone that they're close to that'll say, hey, will you work out a couple of minutes with me here and there throughout the week? And this is really good for our teenage kids specifically.
Can you explain the role of genetics and environmental factors in childhood obesity?
So this is a very big topic that we talk a lot when we educate our parents in our office. Genetics does have a role in how we are with generational weight gain and how we metabolize food. But this is only seen in most of this research to be 5% of reasons why people and kids and families are overweight. Genetics is a very small percentage. What we do see that does affect the child more often is the habits that are introduced in the home. So if we have parents who are also eating large portions, eating foods that are high in calorie, snacking, having sodas, having juices, having more of the things that they shouldn't be having, that is also going to be witnessed by the child, and the child will continue to have those habits as well. So environmental is a big, big issue. How your friends are eating, how your family is eating, especially how your family is active. A lot of parents do have jobs and are very busy with their schedules, so they don't tend to make fitness a priority. And this gets passed down from generation to generation. So in our household, for instance, we do try to make that a priority. Even if I am downstairs in my home gym for 20 or 30 minutes, the whole family is down there. Some of them will exercise, some of them will just hang out with us, but they get to witness some type of fitness with mom and dad every day or every other day. And that enables them to want to also do that or think that it's a normal thing for us to make as a priority. And it's important for kids to see that we as parents also take a big initiative in making sure that our diet and our fitness is good. They go by example, and we are one of their biggest examples in that.
So in your experience, what are some common misconceptions about childhood obesity?
So this is a big barrier that we tend to have as pediatricians when we have our well care visits with our children. Most of our families come from different cultures and different backgrounds. So I will speak from example, the Indian community and the Indian culture. If I had $1 for every time a parent has said, well, this is just our family, we are just bigger people, this is just who we are, this is just, they are not going to be different from us because it's genetically that way. That is something that we do have to address. So education, sitting down and really talking to families and giving them the facts that we tend to see across different research that's been done, and even in our practice, and just having an honest conversation with families. So cultures feel that if a child is underweight or even normal weight, they are not being fed. There is a lack of food. There is even some cultures feel that it could be a sign of poverty or not having enough money for the family. So a heavier child and a child that is larger than most of his peers is seen to be rich or coming from a background where they have abundance. So that is a misconception that we tend to see, especially in the Hispanic culture as well, the Chinese culture, the African cultures, and also, of course, in our Indian culture. So this is the main thing that we have to target. I have a lot of people who come and tell me that my children are very thin for their age, and they haven't, they're not eating enough. If I had $1 every time my mother came and told me, your kids are not eating enough, they need to eat more, that is something that we have to start to change about how we think about it. The best gift that we can give as parents and that we can teach our children is how to do things in moderation. So moderation is key. When you feel like you have eaten enough, when you feel like you have had enough calories or consumption of things, that is enough, and that's okay. So moderation is okay to teach, and that is something that we should make a point to do each and every day with our children.
When it comes to childhood obesity, are there any psychological or emotional aspects to it?
So this is something that we have seen a huge rise in. And I think that most pediatricians across the country can agree with that. With the increased rise of obesity after the pandemic, there has also been an increased rise in obesity with anxiety and depression. And this is causing a lot of issues with how we address obesity in general. We have many centers around in the area that deal with overweight or obese children. Some of them will deal with the aspects of diabetes to kind of control it with a nutritionist. Some of them will deal with the cardiovascular aspect, the heart aspect, maybe even early interventions with anti-cholesterol medications after a certain age. We have a lot of kids on pre-diabetic medications that will help also to decrease their risk factors. But the mental aspect of what happens with childhood obesity is one that it is very hard to tackle. And it is something that can span a little bit longer than a few months. This is something that can take months to years to really tackle. And the kids that have the emotional aspect of weight gain and to get either bullied, made fun of, that is a huge lifelong thing that needs to be addressed. And that is something that we do spend time with in pediatrics to sort of help them understand that either if they are having other medical issues, that the mental aspect of obesity is also a major factor to address.
So how can parents and educators foster a positive body image in kids?
It is very important for us to not judge kids. And we have a lot of families that will make comments, and we have a lot of friends that make comments. And we have to start to back off of that negative body image that we tend to give. It is not healthy, sure, that your child might be overweight or maybe struggling with food control or activity control, but it is also important to be empathetic with your child, with your patient, with your friends, with kids that you see in the community. It is important to understand that they have things that you may not be able to see on the surface and that you should show support. So having things like monthly or annual type of fitness seminars that they can go to, talking about your kids in a regular basis about things that they can do to become healthy, not to be thin and not to become, beautiful because they are thin, but because they can get healthy. And that is the main key here, is to have healthy children, which will in turn bring them a healthy weight. And that is the main thing to show, to switch the conversation about weight into healthy habits.
Is there a role that schools play in addressing childhood obesity?
So we do have many initiatives that have been put through Congress, and for example, the one that comes to mind is the one that our former First Lady, Michelle Obama, had started, and I think that was one of the bigger impacts with school lunches in particular. School lunches for years have known to be high in fat, high in salt, and the choices that were given to kids at school were very poor. And so since 2010, this has become a huge strive forward with the National School Lunch Program that Mrs. Obama had incorporated. So it was mandatory for schools to redo their lunches, mainly with less salt for sure, less fat, more whole grains. Even the milk has been a reduced milk. They don't get to have whole milk. And so those type of small changes that have been done has shown some good feedback from how we've been addressing diet in school. Most of the times kids get breakfast and lunch at school, so the parent at home is only in charge of one meal, especially with low-income families. So this is a huge thing to keep making sure that we have adequate, good, healthy, nutritious meals at school. I usually tell my parents, even though it might be cumbersome, plan ahead with your kid, plan ahead with your child in the beginning of the week and start to pack them certain foods. This alleviates wasting of food, especially with lunches. This actually can give the child more control over what he is choosing to eat, and also to give them healthier choices in that. So I usually say, you know, of course it's free sometimes and it's available, but it's not always the best option for your child.
So, are there any cultural or societal factors that can influence childhood obesity rates?
So it is a daily concern that pediatricians face about cultural backgrounds. So that is a very important thing for us to even educate ourselves on. We have a policy where we see, for example, our children that are struggling with weight loss every 3 months in our office. We get their weight, we get their height, their blood pressure. We kind of have a brief conversation with them. How do they feel about the last 3 months? What's going on? If there's any challenges that they've met with time or food. We always try to get a nutritionist on board, and this really does go a long way. So there are childhood or pediatric nutritionists, for example, in Children's Hospital that we tend to use, and they actually can do a 1-hour preliminary visit with a family and then talk about food choices that they can use as a family depending on their cultural background. So most of the pediatric nutritionists are well trained in telling them that, you know, this is your specific diet for your family with your culture, your background, and these are some of the things that you can make within those choices that will benefit you. So that's something that we also have to kind of study and implement in our conversations.
Nowadays, technology and screen time have become a significant part in children's lives. How can families strike a balance between incorporating technology and an active lifestyle?
Very good question. This is something that we have to address as well, because this technology, screen time, any type of devices, TV, if it's iPads, even obviously cell phones, it tends to be a huge reason why our kids are not moving, are not active. So 99% of households will obviously find this as a challenge as well. We have 5 kids who try to be very active on the screens, and sometimes it is helpful to do that, sometimes it is not. So we have, for example, what I tell my parents and my patients at home is to have a limit, some type of password protected screen time limit. So for kids that are between preschool to about 8, 9 years old, 1 hour of screen time is more than enough, especially after school, that they can use. So this has to be, every device has a way of putting that in, and you can have a password to protect it where it shuts off after an hour. And they would have to request more time. And that works as well for older children, so they can go up to 2 hours of screen time a day. So the key is, you know, there are times where you pass those 1 hour or 2 hour marks for your children, and then they do something. So we say, if you do your tasks, if you finish your homework, if you finish up getting ready for the evening, finish your dinner, finish all of your chores that you're supposed to do, and you still want some downtime, we can add on another 30 minutes. But really restricting the time frame and how your children use the screen time is important. Sometimes we even say, try to go Wi-Fi for a day, Wi-Fi free for a day, and see if that helps. So a lot of times this is our Sabbath day where we just don't have access to the internet. And so this really can help, and this actually becomes more of a habit that kids can start to develop as they're growing older.
So I have one last question for you, Dr. Samuel. Can you provide us with some examples of successful community-based programs that can effectively tackle childhood obesity?
Absolutely. So we have many in the area. Unfortunately, they are associated with larger hospitals. So there, for example, Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C. is one of the bigger centers that we use, and they do have something called the Ideal Clinic. And this is a very multidisciplinary clinic that helps children. There is a nutritionist that is on staff there that meet with the children. There is a endocrinologist that speak with our pre-diabetic or even our type 2 diabetic children and monitor their weight, monitor their diet, if they do need medications, and God forbid insulin as well. There is a cardiologist that also works in this clinic. So it's a multidisciplinary clinic that touches base on each of the needs of the child that has, especially due to their risk factors. And most importantly, there's a psychologist or a therapist there as well. And that also is an important factor in getting kids to be motivated to talk about things that might be due to stress eating, or even causing their depression to cause them to not be active, which is a very common side effect of depression, is just not being active. So these types of centers are hopefully the new stage in our fight against obesity, really getting more areas and more hospitals, more local clinics to do this same type of approach. That really does help, one, with the child to stay accountable, to meet with people who are meeting them for this specific issue with their weight, and also to have them monitored over time. Our goal as pediatricians and as parents should be that children, as they are going into adulthood, have the tools to have a long and healthy life. And that should be a goal between us, our parents, as well as our patients, as well as our community-based groups and churches, is to make sure that the next generation that come after us do better than we have done, especially when it comes to healthy lifestyles. Unfortunately, the risk of heart disease and stroke and people in our community that are needing cardiovascular procedures like stents and even, God forbid, open heart surgery, much younger than we used to see 20, 30 years ago. So there is a rise in awareness, and I'm happy that this is happening, and I'm happy that we're talking about this and that there's things that we can do. So please contact your doctor, make a visit with them, speak with them specifically on just this issue and how other things can be helped and overcome by dealing with this specific issue. And that's the best thing. Have a conversation with your pediatrician. Make sure you have many conversations throughout the year with your pediatrician. There are tons of things online now that are more of an advocate to get children to eat better, sleep better, work out, be more active, and having them have more of a structured lifestyle. So hopefully when they are adults, we are going to see less obesity. We're going to see less heart disease. We're going to see less children on medication for diabetes. We're going to see less depression if we start to tackle these things early on and give them a good foundation as they enter adulthood.
Thank you so much, Dr. Samuel, for being here with us to talk about childhood obesity. I'm sure everybody watching learned a lot and was blessed by this.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate taking the time out to talk to people and anyone who can help guide our kids. And I really appreciate the time and the effort that has been given to this very, very important topic.